Okay, now that we're done sculpting the basic shape, it is time to move on to smaller forms within the model. So I'll bring up the reference here. So when I'm talking about smaller forms, I mean shapes like the rock up there. You know, these kinds of cuts and grooves, and and this kind of wedged form right there. Not talking about details like that, more like this. So let's begin sculpting those. So let's tackle some of those cuts and grooves that we saw on the right side. Those would be things like this and that. So one brush that's really useful when you're trying to do a task like this is going to be the plane brush. Now this brush is a bit interesting. The way it works is that it will pick a two-dimensional plane parallel to the looking angle of your camera, and you can use it to either build up forms along those planes like this, or you can cut into surfaces using that. So if you see, I just cut away everything that is on that plane. So it's similar to the scrape tool in that way, but this can be used to do a few other things. So you'll see if I right click here, and that little red square you see kind of shows you the depth that you're cutting at. I can put my cursor right there, and I'm holding down right click to define where that plane is. So you see right now the plane is at the very front, and now it's back here. So you can see the plane kind of jump when I hit the right mouse button. So if I put the plane right about there, then you need to be looking at it from the right angle too. So if I'm looking almost directly at this face, may need to be looking at it from a slightly off angle. Something kind of like this. Then you see what I can do. Let me try that again. It is a bit of a finicky tool. What you see is I can cut, and I'll get this very harsh groove right there. So if I put it, if I zoom out a bit, put it right about here, and start cutting away, then you see that we get this very rough ridge right there. So I could smooth that a bit. Now, I know that in the reference image this is supposed to be more of a harsh corner, and I'll discuss in another video how it is that we can get that harshness back. But for right now, we're just worried about getting out the major forms. Now this, I don't want this. So I could smooth it out, but I could also use my fill tool and just sort of fill that back in and then smooth it back out. Go back to my plane brush, and I might come in here and kind of scrape that away, kind of maybe scrape in there a bit. And what I'm really just trying to get is I'm trying to get some very deep, very abrupt cuts into the model. So again, kind of going in like that. And you can see the effect that that's starting to have. Now if I want to try and keep these a little bit sharper, I can use my pinch brush. But when you're working in voxels, especially at this low a voxel resolution, it's not going to be terribly effective. So it's a bit of a smoothing pass. I'll go back to my plane brush. Let's see. So I'm going to kind of cut going right across them. direction, maybe going kind of like this. Maybe push the plane back a little bit. So you see, if I put the cursor right here, I can't cut that very far into it. But if I hold down here where the plane has to travel further back into 3D space in order to reach the mesh, then I can start to cut significantly deeper. A little too deep right there. Might use a slightly softer alpha, although that doesn't seem to be making a lot of difference. Just gonna try and sort of unify these. Smooth this out a little bit. Might try cutting that a little deeper. Just go in here, just go at go at another pass at it. Maybe we'll do it again at a slightly different angle this time. Kind of look. So you see we're slowly getting it, to cut a little bit deeper. So you can see it's a much deeper cut now. So I'm going to smooth this out, and then I'm going to fill that in with my fill tool. And I might actually use my pinch tool right here, just so it's so that the ridge itself narrows off as it approaches the bottom. Alright, now if I want to push that a little bit further, I can go to my build brush, and I can pick this third alpha right here. As you see, the profile curve of it is a tapering point. And I can sort of sculpt up on the top, and I can then hold down Control and sculpt down just to push that a little bit further. Alright, let's focus on so that's one way to get those kinds of forms sculpted in. So I can go in just a little bit more, like right here, and I can, actually you don't want it right there, maybe like right around here. You can kind of start to get that worn away. Then I go with my scrape tool maybe and turn off soft scrape, kind of scrape that resulting hard edge away, and then smooth this out just a little bit. I'm only smoothing it a very tiny amount. Then maybe scrape that so it's not quite so obvious. And then just a big old scrape again. So now another type of form that you could try to make, you can do that with something like just the build brush. Now, looking at our reference here, I'm going to, let's sculpt something like this area on top of the rock right there. So in 3D-Coat, I can go in with my build brush, and I'm going to go to my alphas, and I'm going to pick a square alpha. And I'm just going to start to kind of build up. And if you saw the reference image, it's kind of in two layers. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sculpt one layer right here, and then I'm going to sculpt another one up here. And the one on top was fairly rounded. So I'm going to sculpt, and I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to smooth it a bit. I'm going to smooth this one, sculpt some more. And this is one of those things that you just start to get a feel for as you do a lot of sculpting. So I want that crease in between them to be a little bit more defined at this stage. So I'm going to go to stay in my build brush, actually pick this pointier alpha again and just kind of carve down. And maybe even try using the pinch tool just to make that a little bit narrower. There's another tool we'll use later that will really crease that, but just so that we know that's supposed to be a sharp crease, we're going to pinch it together a little bit right now. So that's one. Maybe I'll sculpt a little bit down here on the bottom of this rock. Kind of build up a little bit of a form right there. And the reason I'm using the square alpha is that it's very easy to get this kind of layering effect with the brush strokes that you see often in these types of rocks, because here I'll do that demonstration somewhere else. So if I go up here and I want to sculpt a little bit of a form, you see that as I brush, we're getting a lot of smaller layers that you may want on a rock like this. And those layers, when you're using the square alpha, you mostly just get them for free. If I were using a softer alpha, you see it all kind of blends together, which maybe you want, maybe you don't. It depends kind of on the type of surface that you're working on. In my particular case, I like to have them. Now I'm going to try and make this ridge a little bit flatter. So I could use the scrape tool and sort of scrape away from the top, but I don't want to cut too much more away from this volume. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of sculpt here around the rim. There we go, just like that. And then maybe fill this area in on top. Just like that. And then I'll come in like maybe my scrape brush and kind of start to scrape that away, make it a little bit of a harsher edge. Now you notice I've gotten rid of most of that layering I was talking about. And that will happen. Sometimes the work you do will cover up the work that you've done. But it's nice to know it's there. So let's just tackle one more area. So let's work on something like this. So that'd be more or less down here. And just using the build brush, what I can do is I'm just going to keep brushing in this area, and I kind of want to fill in this region using just the build brush. I want to build a rock that averages between this area and the arch itself. And then maybe it kind of leads into this groove that I cut earlier. And make my brush a little bit bigger. Kind of smooth it out. I want to be careful not to accidentally smooth out this area. So again, we're just kind of building. I'm going to have it work its way up in here. Now, with 3D-Coat 4.5, uses this image-based lighting, which unfortunately on most of their provided lighting spheres leaves the bottom of your mesh kind of dark and makes it a little hard to sculpt. The fastest and easiest solution to that is if you pick one of these shaders. I usually go with this light brown one. Then you can see everything very clearly. So now that I'm working on the bottom, just want to start to build out that form. Maybe smooth it a little bit. Come back in here, fill this out. And yeah, maybe fill this area in. Now there's a lot to fill in on this model. There's quite a lot to do for these medium forms, but the techniques for doing them are fairly simple, at least for a rock like this. So I'm going to stop the video right there. Again, that's mostly just the build tool, the plane tool, maybe a bit of scrape and pinch, and occasionally some filling. Fairly simple stuff, you just have to know how to apply it. So I'm going to, again, as I said, I'm going to stop the video here, and then when we come back, I'm going to talk about sort of how to work in some smaller details.